طيب بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وخليله وأمينه على وحيه. أنا I gonna always keep emphasizing the reality that every Muslim should realize and should act upon it is that we have in our hands great guidance that we did not leverage for a long time. And that's okay. I mean, you better be late than never. Whatever happened, happened. But it's a book that, unfortunately, we were told that we cannot understand it. So we created a clergy in Islam. And then we somehow thought, and we're still thinking, that we don't have to. So one is you cannot, and then second is you don't have to. Simply because we know the deen, and the deen is just a short list of do's and don'ts, and we know this list and we're doing it, so there is no point. Whoever is praying and fasting is doing it. Whoever is not he knows that he has to do, but they're not doing it, and therefore there is no need to put any time or efforts in Quran. That's totally wrong. All of this is nonsense. Quran was meant for every Muslim to study it, not just. And also, we were told that it's enough to read Quran and focus on how much you read. And then if you can memorize some Quran, or many people are not memorizing, but if you can get your children to memorize some Quran, that's great. And then, of course, if you reach all the way to get yourself or your children to learn Tajweed, then you got it made. None of this is correct. None of this. I mean, there is nothing wrong against reading Quran. Of course, we need to do that and to memorize it and to learn how to read it in a proper way. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing in this for this book is to study it. Study it and embark on a life journey of studying it all the time. Studying and studying. It's like your study for a test. You study, take notes, you research, you ask. It's like any student who study, and then when they do their homework, they try to consult the textbook or extra resources, watch videos, answer questions, or look up the answers. Studying as if you study as if you're going to teach it. That's what Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. You learn it and you teach it. We forgot that, and we get into the easier part, or the superficial part, which is reading and memorizing and learning Tajweed or listening. All of this is good, but that's the extra. The essential thing is studying the Quran to extract the guidance from it. So we need to revive that. We need. That's what we have been saying all along, that we need to revive this tradition of studying the Quran individually and collectively, and have that dynamic discussion and vibrant in the community, that you share what you learn. It's like a potluck. You share what you learn, and you get from others what they learned, while everybody is studying the Quran. It's an amazing book until, even if you know it and you memorize it, you still, whenever you review it, you come across many verses that as if you see them for the first time. And I shared this with you before. I told you I had a colleague who she's not Muslim, but she's does English literatures. That's her specialty. And she was so impressed with the Quran. She talks about the Quran in a very impressed about linguistically. Forget about anything else, linguistically, and that she was learning it translated, not even. So it's really an amazing, whichever language you read it, it's an amazing book. طيب, we reached a point where it's like a junction. As you can see, I don't know how many weeks now, we're still in Surah Al-Baqarah. We probably we'll finish like in a couple of weeks, but you can see how much we extracted. And that's not all, and I'm not claiming that we were able to extract everything that could be extracted. That's gonna never, it's not gonna happen. Until the day of judgment, people will be able to extract more from the Quran. And I'm not a master of the Arabic language, I'm not a scholar, but I was able to extract whatever, and with your questions and discussions, we were able to extract a lot so far, and we are now in verse 252. Oh no, verse 242. 242. We finished the divorce and marriage and all the issues related to family, and we approached from different angle. We didn't focus on the fiqh. We focused on mainly how Quran is emphasizing the importance of building a very healthy family, very robust. And then if it doesn't work, how it can be separated in a very decent way. And all of this under one great principle, إمساك بمعروف أو تسريح بإحسان. So if you forget about everything else, when it comes to this subject, it's just إمساك بمعروف أو تسريح بإحسان. Either happy marriage or decent divorce. There is no point in continuing if things really are not working. Islam does not encourage divorce, but if it's always the balance between the benefit and the harm, and if the harm outweighs the benefit, then there is no point in continuing. And then divorce does not have to be a fight, does not have to be people don't have to destroy and try to demonize each other and destroy each other's reputation and get not only the two individuals but the whole their families will be in a war. There is no point. There is a way to make it in a very decent, and it should be basically that it doesn't have to be one of them is bad or one of them have to prove that I'm good. It's not my fault. It's because the other person is bad. It's very simple. Two people could not continue together. That's the guidance of the Quran. The guidance of the Quran, that there is a partnership that did not work, and it has to be, if business partnership has to be separated in a decent way, family is even more important, especially if there are children involved. And they said that this is one of the cases where we are almost doing exactly what we're doing is almost runs opposite to the teaching of the Quran. Now today, marriage is haphazard, families are conducted in a very haphazard way, and divorce, you know how it is. It's why? Because people don't want to educate themselves, people don't want to learn, people don't want to improve. They're still doing things the way their grandfathers were doing it. Haphazard marriage, haphazard family, and then if there is a divorce, then it's a very messy. And that's unfortunately happens even between people who are very religious and very good practicing Muslim and activists, and sometimes even imams and scholars. طيب, verse 243, it's shifting gear completely, completely different subject. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, remember that before we get into this verse, remember what we need to keep in the background whenever we study the Quran, that this is Quran is meant to prepare the individual and the community for the mission. That's the main purpose of this Quran. It's basically shaping you up spiritually, intellectually, clearing your mind, clearing your vision, strengthening your spirituality and your will power and resolve. So why? Because there is a huge mission that is. So Quran is explaining the mission and then preparing you for it as an individual and as a community. And it has many tools. And of course, before that, and the foundations of all of this is Tawheed, Iman billahi wal yawm al-akhir, which is always emphasized. as the driving force or the engines that will keep you going, even if you are exhausted, even if you are met with so much resistance. That's what keep you going. Iman billah wal yawm al-akhir, because at the end of the day, this deen, its source is divine, and the goal is pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in between, it's mainly civic. In between, it's mainly serving the greater good, developing yourself into a role model, maximizing your contribution to the greater good, and maximizing your positive impact on people around you and on the environment in which you are living. That's the essence of the mission of Islam. It's basically tazkiyah and islah. Tazkiyah is you keep trying to be all you can be, realize all your potential, and then maximize your contribution to the greater good. That's islah, and your positive impact on the individual around you and then the environment in which you're living. And that's another form of tazkiyah. Tazkiyah can be done to yourself. That's self-development, can be done to others. That's uplifting or mentoring or educating. And that can happen only, as we said before, through interaction with people, maximizing interaction with people. How can you have a positive influence on people if you are isolated? And then through civic engagement, because without that you cannot have any impact. So keep that in mind always. And one of the tools is the story of the people before us. And as you can see, there are verses in Quran, you can read them and go over them quickly, and probably you get nothing out of them, but they are really full of guidance. If you just put the time to reflect or to search or to ask, they are amazing. One of them is the first verse that we're gonna read today. I mean, and I believe, I'm sure that most Muslims will go over it and they got nothing out of it. ألم تر إلى الذين خرجوا من ديارهم وهم ألوف حذر الموت فقال لهم الله موتوا ثم أحياهم إن الله لذو فضل على الناس ولكن أكثر الناس لا يشكرون. يعني one verse full loaded يعني with concepts and guidance that are not obvious, but require some effort and from our part. Right. I said Quran has a message and want to fulfill that goal, which is to clarify your mission for you and the purpose of Allah on earth, which was assigned to you to fulfill it. Remember that we define Islam as فهم وإنفاذ مراد الله ابتغاء مرضات الله. يعني you dedicate your life to understand and fulfill Allah's purpose in pursuit of Allah's pleasure. The Quran, in its very eloquent way, has vehicles. Uses different vehicles to convey the message. We have to be aware of this, because there is an incident, but there is a message. And our focus should not be on the incident itself, because Quran is full of the stories. For example, Qasas al-Anbiya, I think about 1/3 of the Quran, a lot of it about Bani Israel, but the purpose is there are underlining messages that are being conveyed. So you read the story and you try to extract the message, which is something that unfortunately we're not doing it. We haven't been doing this for a long time, because our the relationship with the Quran was very superficial, and we're focusing on reading. And I finished Juz'a, I Wird, I don't know how much I read, etc. We forget to focus on the meaning and the study and the quality, and focusing that you read the text to extract the message or the guidance. One of those verses that were not obvious, I mean, I don't know how much you can get if you go, if you read this verse like quickly or superficially. The verse says that 242. Consider those people who abandoned, 243, sorry, 243. Consider, talking to the Prophet, consider those people who abandoned their homeland in fear of death. Something, storm, whatever happened. So Quran does not want us to focus on those details. These people, they fled, they abandoned their homeland in fear of death. Even though there were thousands of them. And thousands of them, they were either it is an enemy attack or there is something happened, so they fled. Fled why? Fearing death. Pay attention to this. Right? When they abandoned their homeland fearing death, Allah caused them to die. God said to them, Allah said to them, die, and then brought them back to life again. What is the point here? The point here that in my understanding, and some tafsir also say this, is that basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran here wants to tell us that this life and death matter has nothing to do with courage or anything else. If you are brave, that doesn't gonna shorten your lifespan, and if you are coward, it's not gonna extend it. So these people, they were fleeing death, and they ended up dying in the place they went to, and then they were brought back to life without any effort from them. So Quran is telling us that life and death is from Allah. It's not, you shouldn't be worried about it at all. Of course, you have to be cautious and take all the precautions and preserve life, because that's one of the maqasid of Islam. That's one overarching of goals of Islam, is to protect life. But we shouldn't be very anxious or to the point that we think that we have control over this. So these people abandoned their town to flee death. They end up dying. And then they were brought back to life without any efforts from them. And that's major concept that Quran wants us to communicate, that matter, life and death are in the hands of Allah. And therefore, you shouldn't be too much obsessed with it. And strengthening that that's a part of Tawheed, of course. It's a part of Tawheed is that Allah yuhyi wa yumit. Yuhyi wa yumit. This is a case. Of course, the verse in Surah An-Nisa says, وَلَوْ كُنْتُمْ فِي بُرُوجٍ مُشَيَّدَةٍ. Is it Nisa? If Sheikh Ismail is with us. I will try, inshallah, to get the verses that says basically that there is nowhere to flee or to avoid death. Wherever you are is going to come to you at the moment it was designed to come, and therefore, so major fundamental concept of Tawheed was conveyed through very short story with no details. Didn't tell us where this happened, why these people they abandoned their homeland, nothing. It just many of them, thousands of them, and they fled, and then they died, and Allah brought them back to life to tell them that basically it's not, this matter is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then conclude with وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَشْكُرُونَ, that even because one of the greatest bounty from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that life itself, and you know that sometimes, unfortunately, we're not as grateful as we're supposed to be towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We forget the countless bounties that Allah has given, which there is nothing you can do in life to thank Him enough for it. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. طيب. And then what? Remember the purpose of the Quran, preparing people for that mission, and then encourage them to sacrifice or put whatever sacrifice is needed for that mission. Now, qital, I'm not going to elaborate on this because we covered it extensively. Qital in Islam, fighting is not jihad. They are very different concept, and fighting is not a principle in Islam. And you can be very good Muslim and reach the highest level of heaven without ever fighting or doing anything. It's not a principle. Yeah. It's something that is very restricted. Islam, it is not a pacifist religion, but Islam believes in just wars that is agreed upon in the international law. People can defend themselves. وقاتلوا في سبيل الله الذين يقاتلونكم. And fight those who are fighting ولا تعتدوا, and do not exceed. And then we, covered this extensively. So there is qital only when it is really, it's very restricted on when it can happen and how it can happen. And then I firmly believe that the restrictions in the Quran and in the Islam are stronger than the international law. The restrictions of when fighting can happen and how it should be conducted are much more restricted than it is now accepted internationally. So قاتلوا في سبيل الله واعلموا أن الله سميع عليم. Because death is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so it's not related for you that if you have to sacrifice or you have to be bravery or sacrifice or even fighting when it is necessary and it is done the right way and the proper way. This has nothing to do with all of the crazy and mad incident done in the name of Islam. Of course, even nowadays, things have changed even from the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the time of Khulafa al-Rashidin. Things have changed because now there is a nation state and there is a constitution that's internally and externally there are treaties. And Quran tells us, يا أيها الذين آمنوا أوفوا بالعقود. All of these are contracts. All of these are contracts, and you have to honor them. And that's, I told you that even Dr. Qardawi in his one of the most recent books, he emphasized that there is no jihad al-talab, or you go out to fight and attack people. And he emphasized this idea of that nowadays there are international law and there are treaties between countries and there are things, and all of these have to be honored again. So after clarifying that death and life are things have nothing to do with the bravery or anything, now tell Muslim to Allah, of course, the end of the previous verse, Allah shows real favor to people, but most of them are ungrateful. Fight in Allah's cause. So it's always clear. Fight in Allah's cause. And that's to tell you also the importance of preventing Muslims from fighting in Mecca, because so that they will not carry on fighting as they used to be before out of tribal sentiment or pride, because that's Arabs used to fight at that time, but they were told not to fight for so many years, so that when they're given the permission again, it is for a cause now. It's not for your tribe, it's not for revenge, it's for a cause, and therefore it has to be restricted by that cause. And this time again it said قاتلوا في سبيل الله, always قاتلوا في سبيل الله, and then الذين يقاتلونكم. So it's a just war again in self-defense. Just war in self-defense. And then,
Doctor, you were talking about the death, Surah An-Nisa 77 verse.
Jazakallahu khairan. Surah An-Nisa verse
78.
78. أينما تكونوا يدرككم الموت ولو كنتم في بروج مشيدة. So that's great. Jazakallah khair. That emphasizes. We translate in Surah An-Nisa, Surah 4. Surah 4, verse 78. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in the same context, death will overtake you no matter where you may be, even inside high towers. So whether you flee your town to avoid death, or you hide or you secure yourself in a very strong towers, death is going to come to you. All right, so sacrifice, jihad in Islam, it's basically sacrifice, it's striving, doing your utmost, and then it's always linked by your lives, if it is necessary, and then your money. And that tells you basically, that summarizes everything. Because if you are willing to put these then you should be more willing to put your time or your efforts or thinking or whatever, if you are ready to put this. So that's why it's like Salah and Zakat are symbols for relationship with Allah and for the civic work, for doing things for people and for worshiping Allah directly, or direct worship and indirect worship. So after, you need to be willing to put your life on the line for the cause, and that's something nobody disagree. I mean, if you say this even in this society, in any secular societies, sacrificing for a cause, of course, for a just cause in the right way, it's something that is honored everywhere. Yes, some Muslims unfortunately have abused this, and therefore nowadays the concept of jihad is really very had very bad connotation. But the reality is every nation honors their martyrs. Their martyrs are people who put their lives on the line to defend the nation or to defend people. So we should not be go to the defensive, or we don't have to justify anything done in the name of Islam. It is bad, it's bad. But also at the same time, these are principles that everybody, or they are very universal, and they're not even controversial. طيب من ذا الذي يقرض الله قرضا حسنا. Spending in a beautiful way. فيضاعفه الله أضعافا كثيرة. طيب, Allah want to tell you spend, but Quran is very eloquent. So how it comes to who is willing to lend Allah? It's amazing. Who will give Allah a good loan, قرضا حسنا, which He will increase for him many times over. You can't hope for something more eloquent than this. من ذا الذي يقرض الله قرضا حسنا فيضاعفه له أضعافا كثيرة. First of all, lending Allah is by itself is very great incentive. When you're lending whom? You're lending the one who gave you. Well, this is his money. This is his money, and Allah is telling you who is willing to lend Allah. And then another incentive, فيضاعفه له أضعافا كثيرة. Which He will increase for him many times over. طيب, that's it? No. Like the Quran said about life and death over there, now here about money. وَاللَّهُ يَقْبِضُ وَيَبْسُطُ. Same thing. الله يقبض ويبسط وإليه ترجعون. Look how, I don't know, it's very few words, but it's very loaded, with guidance. And it is Allah who withholds and Allah who gives abundantly. And it is to Him that you will return. Wallahi, really, it's really very impressive. So, lending Allah to encourage you, to tell you need to spend, and spend generously, because you're lending Allah. So you want to, and then it's going to be multiplied many times over. So you need to lend as much as possible, because that's a very good business. It's basically, I don't know if tomorrow banks will tell you that the interest rate is 50% or 200%. People will be rushing to save, to put the deposit money in. Wallahu, and then you may think about keep in mind that money belongs to Allah, and He's the one who gives and withholds. So compare with death. Withholding will not make you rich. Spending will not make you poor. It's a very similar. Running away from the town did not protect you from life. And then you were brought back to life without any effort from you. Here, spending will not make you poor. And then greed will not make you rich. Why? Because there is a different concept. There is something else here. There is money belongs to Allah, and He's the one who gives and withholds. Yeah. And then in another verse will tell you, spend from what I entrusted you with. It's not your money. It's His money, and He entrusted you with it, and now He's telling you spend in a very beautiful way, in a very nice way, and يقرض الله قرضا حسنا ويضاعفه, etc. And then وإليه ترجعون. There is an implicit that there is a time where you're gonna find that money when you need it the most, the one that, and this is another concept, another fundamental concept in Quran. ما تقدموا لأنفسكم من خير تجدوه عند الله. يعني this sending forth. يعني ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد. This meaning that was emphasized in Quran, very important, is that basically, I think you all know that about the people who migrate for a limited time, and they're planning to go home. It's like many Muslims here for a long time. Things have now changed, but for a long time, Muslims were planning to go back. But it is probably more obvious in some European countries where workers, they go for a very limited time, and then whatever money they make, they send it back home. And they live at the minimum standard of living, absolute necessity. Why? Because they want to invest at home so that they go back and they find their house, they were able to build a house and maybe start a business or a store, etc., so that they can go and live a decent life. It's exactly the same thing when it comes to this life and the hereafter, especially in the matter of spending. Of course, I know you know me, and I'm totally against this school of thought that you hear it in some mosques, say this life is not important, and it's okay to fail, and you don't have really to work hard and to be rich. And Rasul died while he was poor, and all of this. No, and I find that all of this nonsense. Yeah. It's Muslims have to compete in this life and to excel. That's if you want to really have Allah to be pleased with you. You try to excel, be as rich as you can, as powerful as you can, as strong as you can. With one major difference is you're doing that so that you can contribute more to the cause of Allah. Others will do that for individual reason, for just to indulge in this life. It's you're competing, and you want to be, if you're a student, you try to be the best. If you are in business, you have to try to be the richest. If you are in politics, well, you have to be the most successful, aim very high, but with the intention that you want to have more so that you can do more for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, wallahu, again, this is very important. And then, وَإِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ. This time was not explicit. Over there, it was explicit. يعني وما تقدموا لأنفسكم, whatever you send forth to Allah, you're going to find it. ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد. Everybody checks every day their saving account with Allah, how much they put in it, so that because it's one moment, يعني. It's a 1 second. It's a fraction of a second. Somebody dies. Suddenly, everything that we consider important now becomes not important at all. Because that, whatever you have, is going to belong to some other people. And the only thing that matters is the other account that you opened with Allah and you invested in it. It's in one fraction of second. It's in fraction of second. Suddenly, everything that is occupies our mind becomes not important at all. And the only thing that is important is what you invested and you saved with Allah. All right, another story. ألم تر إلى الملأ من بني إسرائيل. Bani Israel, remember that the reason was mentioned extensively in Quran. There is a reason for this. The reason, the story of Bani Israel, which is the children of Jacob, Israel is Yaqub, Bani Israel, the reason for this is that this is the community that was entrusted with the mission for very long time before Muslims were assigned that mission, because so many prophets are from Bani Israel. So the mission of Islam, you can think of it as entrusted to Adam, and then to Bani Israel, and then not to Muslim community or Muslim nation or whatever, to every Muslim individual. It became each believer should become the emissary to his or her network or circle. Rasul Qawmeh. I remember one Jum'ah, I emphasized this concept of each one should try to become Rasul Qawmeh, the emissary to his circle. The only difference is basically Rasul was receiving the Quran directly, and now we have it saved. And we have the whole Quran and searchable and everything. So that's the only difference. The only difference, there was revelation that stopped, and now there is extraction. There is extraction from that complete pharmacy or revelation, how you extract from it guidance and you deliver it in the same way as Rasul did. And that's a major change, major turning point in the history of humanity, how humanity is not going to receive any messenger anymore. There is no more revelation. There is a book that was preserved, and each one of you has to become the emissary or the messenger to his or her people without any revelation, but fresh understanding. There is no more fresh revelation, but there should be always fresh understanding. So, this is an interesting story of Bani Israel. ألم تر إلى الملأ من بني إسرائيل من بعد موسى إذ قالوا لنبي لهم ابعث لنا ملكا نقاتل في سبيل الله قال هل عسيتم إن كتب عليكم القتال ألا تقاتلوا قالوا وما لنا ألا نقاتل في سبيل الله وقد أخرجنا من ديارنا وأبنائنا فلما كتب عليهم القتال تولوا إلا قليلا منهم والله عليم بالظالمين. So long verse, story of Bani Israel. ألم تر إلى الملأ من بني إسرائيل. See the translation. Consider the leaders of the children of Israel who came after Moses when they said to one of their prophets. Look at the Quran, does not pay to any attention to details that is not important, so that you will not get distracted from the main message or lessons. Set up a king for us and we shall fight in Allah's cause. So Bani Israel asking one of their prophets, we need a king, appoint a king so that he can lead us in fighting for Allah's cause. We want to fight. So he said, the prophet, their prophet, what could it be that you would not, but could it be that you would not fight if it were ordained for you? Yani, are you sure? Are you sure if it happens, if you are a king is appointed and is gonna ask you, are you going to answer? They said, how could we not fight in Allah's cause when we and our children have been driven out of our homeland? So they confirmed that no, we are serious. Not only this is Allah's cause, but we have another motivation because we were driven we and our children have been driven out of our homeland. So we have strong reasons to fight. Yet, when they recommended to fight, all but a few of them turned away. Allah has full knowledge of those who do wrong. طيب, they asked, they were assigned, they did not, they failed or they did not answer the cause. Of course, Bani Israel, بعد Musa, you know, they were in very difficult situations and conditions. And then some tafsir, or interpretation of the Quran, say that there was some kind of revival, or they start to remember and try to basically go back to do what they are supposed to do. So they asked for fighting against those who transgressed against them, or confirmed, but they failed in the first test, except a few. There is a big lesson in the story. We'll inshallah come to it toward the end, when the outcome of the battle. But there is that probably there has never been a victory or major change in history before the ranks are sorted out. And while things are so, and that tells you why most, if not all, messages and messengers faced those difficult situation in the beginning. They were sent to affect major change, and that requires very solid people. And therefore, that's why prophets were very patient. They work for a whole year, and sometimes only one person answered their call, or two, or couple here and couple there. The Prophet ﷺ, I think for 13 years, he got a few dozens in Mecca. So this testing, and it's how it meant for sorting out the ranks. And also there is an implicit lesson here. You shouldn't ask for this. And you shouldn't ask for this because the nature of inner nature of a human being, the normal one, does not like fighting. And Quran emphasizes this. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالُ وَهُوَ كُرْهٌ لَكُمْ. It's not something that you should be asking for. Especially that if you ask for, you may, and if it happens, you may fail. So what's the point? There is an implicit lesson here and which was confirmed in previous verse, that qital or fighting should never be a hobby or something enjoyable. It has to stay. It's something that we hate, we don't like. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالُ وَهُوَ كُرْهٌ لَكُمْ. Fighting was prescribed on you, of course, again, with all those conditions and restrictions, and it is something that you hate. Allah is telling people that it is something that you hate, and He's telling them that's okay, that's it, that's the normal thing. Quran did not condemn them for this. Told them, وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. You may dislike something, and it might be good for you. It doesn't say that you should love it, or you should be very comfortable with it, or you should enjoy it or like it. So there is an implicit lesson here. This is something that you should not be asking for. And then it's amazing how much work Quran does. It's like I think that's Brother Abdullah one time said this. It's in a different context, but it's Quran. It's like a maintenance engineer, and he has all these screwdrivers and things, and works on your heart and on your mind, and shaping it up and fixing things and filling gaps. And so and the story is just the vehicle. The story is just the vehicle to convey those messages. وقال لهم نبيهم إن الله قد بعث لكم طالوت ملكا. Of course, the end of the verse is always, remember that the approach, methodology of Islam is not to rely on the rules or the law, it's to rely more on the self-restraint. So there is always, most of the verses, they end up and conclude with that, with something to encourage you to do what you're supposed to do, or to refrain from what you're not supposed to do. So here was Wallahu alim bil-zalimin. Over there was wa ilayhi turja'un. The previous verse, wa'alamu anna Allah sami'un alim. And we mentioned this many times, that all of these verses, usually they conclude with something. They start with what, to tell you what's the lesson, or what you should learn, what should do, and what you should avoid, and then comes with those incentive packaging, in explicit way or implicit. ولكن أكثر الناس لا يشكرون. Most people are ungrateful. So he's telling you that you need to be grateful. And then وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. And then وَإِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ. And then وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ بِالظَّالِمِينَ. So the conclusion of the verses, we mentioned this several times. And it's really, most verses of Quran have something like this, to reinforce the concept of Tawheed and to motivate you to do what you're supposed to do. وقال لهم نبيهم من الله قد بعث لكم طالوت ملكا. So now there are people who failed about the principle of qital aslan, and it's start with when they ask for it. So when it was prescribed, many people failed or did not respond. Now there is another test. Somebody was appointed, does not have the profile. And this is to tell us how we need to have very fixed and robust measures or indicators, or values, that the value of the person is inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, that the best amongst you is the one who is the most pious. So in this story, in this verse, that is going to be emphasized, because in a story fashion. So طالوت ملكا. Now بني إسرائيل قالوا أن يكون له الملك علينا ونحن أحق بالملك منه ولم يؤت سعة من المال. Let's read translation first. Okay. This prophet said to them, Allah has now appointed Talut. God has appointed Talut to be your king. What was the answer? But they said, how can he be king over us when we have a greater right to rule than he? He does not even have great wealth. What are you talking about? Talut was not from the descendant of the, the noble, whatever. لم يكن من نسل الملوك. Talut. So it's like, for example, like a noble class, and the king was expected to come from that, and then somebody else appointed. So, and he wasn't rich. So Quran is telling us that your family or your tribe, that's not the criterion, and then your wealth, that's not criterion. For leadership, there is another criterion. It's different. We know in the early days of Islam how the leaders were chosen not because of their wealth or because the companions consider them to be the most pious or the most qualified. Not only pious, because pious is not enough for leadership, but the most qualified for the job, and this is emphasized here. قال إن الله اصطفاه عليكم وزاده بسطة في العلم والجسم. So the answer, these are not the criterion, that the ones that you mentioned. Allah has chosen him, and chosen him based on what? To tell you what should be the criteria. God has chosen him over you and has given him great knowledge and stature. بسطة في العلم والجسم. Basically, the man Of course, jism at that time, even physical strength is important. I mean, these people are going to be leading fights, and those fights at that time, we're not talking about missiles or drones. We were talking about people fighting in battlefield. Yani. So very important. Of course, Quran is the message is for us. Yani. Quran is not telling us story, yani, for just to tell a story, yani. But that's a story and that's a message. The message is you who is reading Quran now, and you as Muslim individuals or community, the criteria for choosing leaders amongst you is these. Are not, it's the qualifications. Knowledge, and over there was physical strength. Nowadays, other qualifications or strength that makes someone good leader, but doesn't which nationality, of course, for us here, or original countries came from, or what kind of job, or how wealthy he is, even though, as you know, that in the community we apply a lot of this. Unfortunately, there is a lot of this is being applied, the wrong criterion. That's the first answer. And then there is another answer. It's even more fundamental. Yani. And that's the mulk of Allah. Yani. Wallahu yu'ti mulkahu man yasha. Yani. Tumalkum, yani. Yani. Wallahu yu'ti mulkahu man yasha. Yani. This is something like the money that Allah yaqbud wa yabsut. Like life, Allah gives and withholds. Gives life and takes it. Gives money and withholds. That's the mulk. It's to belong to Allah. Yani. Allah yu'ti mulkahu man yasha. We accept that in our daily life. Somebody does whatever they want with their property. Yani. This is something that belongs to Allah, very fundamental. Yani. Chosen him over you and has given him great knowledge and stature. Allah grants his authority to whoever he pleases. Yani, if we want to use our language, it's none of your business. Yani, this is something that belongs to Allah. It's like the money belongs to Allah, yaqbud wa yabsut, life and death. And now we have, what they call it? Authority. Allah grants his authority to whoever he pleases. Yani. You are arguing with whom? Yani. So you can see how verses are full of yani, guidance and lessons, of course, for us. So if you don't approach Quran this way, you will read these stories. I don't know how much you will get out of it, but Quran will not do its job. Yeah. It will not shape your spirituality and your mindset. It will not empower you. It will not inspire you. It doesn't. You're just reading. Yeah. Wallahu wasi'un alim, always reinforcing the Tawheed concepts. Wallahu wasi'un alim. إذن يؤتي ملكه من يشاء والله واسع عليم. Allah is magnanimous, all-knowing. Right. After establishing that, and establishing that he was chosen, because Allah grants his authority to whomever he chooses, and then because of the criteria, and now just to help these people, to help them answering the call. وقال لهم نبيهم إن آية ملكه أن يأتيكم التابوت فيه سكينة من ربكم وبقية مما ترك آل موسى وآل هارون تحمله الملائكة إن في ذلك لآية لكم إن كنتم مؤمنين. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to succeed in those tests, doesn't want us to fail. So he's making them easy, makes it easy to them, which is because at that time, were still people believe in concrete miracles. Yeah. And by the way, that's one of the major difference with the last message, is it came with no physical miracles. Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his miracle was this guidance that in our hand. Yeah. Their prophet said to them, the sign of his authority, yani just to make you comfortable following this king that you asked for, these are my words, but the translation says, their prophet said to them, the sign of his authority will be that the ark of the covenant will come to you. This is some of the things that sacred things for Bani Israel that were lost when they were driven to the Babylon, and so will come to you. In it there will be the gift of tranquility from your Lord, and relics of the followers of Moses and Aaron carried by the angels. يعني مخلفات الأنبياء. There is a copy of Al-Alwah, the things that Moses received, the tablets, it's a miracle. It's a miracle that for these people to accept the man, the leader who was appointed, and he does not come from very rich background or from the noble class. There is a sign in this for you if you believe. So إن في ذلك لآية لكم إن كنتم مؤمنين. طيب, that's it. You have no excuse anymore. You said this is not, we are not accepting him because of this reason. Allah is telling you what should be the criteria, and then told you that his authority and he gives it to whoever he chooses. And now he gave you this miracle, to be comfortable. طيب, they went. So some people passed this test. فلما فصل طالوت بالجنود قال إن الله مبتليكم بنهر فمن شرب منه فليس مني ومن لم يطعمه فإنه مني إلا من اغترف غرفة بيده. طيب, why this test? يعني they were in their way to the battlefield. Those who finally accepted because of that miracle and they went, they passed the test. When Talut set out with his forces, this is the king who was appointed to lead them to fight, he said to them, God will test you with the river. So this is something that didn't come from him, came from Allah. Anyone who drinks from it will not belong with me, but anyone who refrains from tasting it will belong with me. طيب, why this? Why this river and test, etc.? These people are going for a battle, and the discipline is already shaky, as you have seen. From the beginning, it wasn't really very solid. They're not talking about very solid troops. So, sorting out the ranks. You'd rather go with the smaller troop, but very solid, rather than with the larger troop, but it's a mixed bag. So another sorting the ranks. Why? Because, by the way, that's always the case. It's not only even in fighting, it's even in social change. You want to initiate a social movement of change in any society. If you don't start with a very solid core group, very solid, you go nowhere. If you go for numbers and you have mixed bag, first of all, you're not going to go anywhere. But even if you expand, the problems with that group will expand with it. So you'd rather bring it as small as to the smallest, very cohesive, solid, disciplined group. First of all, it will do a better job. And second, it will expand without having the diseases to expand with it. So that's very important. I personally have a first-hand experience of this, that anytime you want to go for a major change or to initiate a major change, you'd rather make sure that you have a very small, very solid group, and don't worry about the numbers. Numbers can come because that small group can expand later on and expand in a healthy way. But if you start with something that is mixed bag or shaky, first of all, you're going to spend all the time maintenance. And then if you manage to expand, the diseases also, or the problems of that group will expand with it. So there was this test. Let's see if these people, I remember President Obama one time, because Obama never served in the military. So when they were debating the strategies in Afghanistan, of course, he was worried that maybe these generals will not take him seriously. He was young also. So they were presenting him the different strategies in Afghanistan, what to do between expanding or withdrawing, and a lot of details. And there were two groups, I believe, or more, who have very different strategies. And then they finished presenting. So he asked them, before I give my opinion, is it going to be implemented? And of course, these people are very civilized. They know what their limits. They know this is the president of the country, and they said, of course. That's your. That's your privilege. And then he spoke, because there is no point if you start talking. And we remember before that, the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, remember when he was asked to declare da'wah, and before he told them about Allah and his message and Islam, etc., he told them, لو أخبرتكم أن خيلا بالوادي تريد أن تغير عليكم أكنتم مصدقين. And if I tell you that there is an army out in the outskirts of Mecca that is about to attack you, are you going to believe me? They said, yes, because you never lied to us. So, and then he told them that he was sent with that message. So bottom line is testing, sorting out the ranks, because there is no point in taking a troop that is shaky. Even if it is large, you'd rather go with the smaller one. And that's exactly the lesson that we learned today, because even though they lost people in the way, like it happened in the Battle of Uhud, by the way, they lost people in the way, but that was necessary, and the outcome was good, wasn't bad. So river, most of them, they told them, this is a test, don't drink from it. Most of them drank from that river, except a few. So now we ended up, test after test, and every time there are people who fail. And then the last test. فلما جاوزه هو والذين آمنوا معه قالوا لا طاقة لنا اليوم بجالوت وجنوده. طيب. Again, it's an issue of criteria. So it's reinforcing this belief of Tawheed. As long you did your part, as long your intention is pure, as long you did everything you can, as long you are coming out for Allah's cause, then you should count on the help of Allah. Of course, not to the point that you start failing to do your part and relying on Allah. That's tawakkul. That's the abuse of the concept of putting your trust in the hands of Allah. So, but they all drank deep from it, except for a few. When he crossed it with those who had kept faith, if you cannot pass this test of not drinking, how are you going to accept the instructions from your leader in the middle of the battalion? With those who kept faith, they said, we have no strength today against Goliath and his warriors. There is balance of power. We are small in number, and there is no way we can deal with these. This is a huge army. And again, the criteria was numbers. And we know that numbers, it's not like number is not important. No, number is important and strength is important. And but it's not the criteria, because we know وَيَوْمَ حُنَيْنٍ إِذْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ كَثْرَتُكُمْ. Just to reinforce the same principle. In Hunayn, in the Battle of Hunayn, Muslims were large in number, huge. For the first time, they are probably outnumbered their enemies. But it was that mixed bag. And then some Muslims said, today we can win just because of our numbers. And you know what happened? It started with the defeat. وَيَوْمَ حُنَيْنٍ إِذْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ كَثْرَتُكُمْ فَلَمْ تُغْنِ عَنْكُمْ شَيْئًا وَضَاقَتْ عَلَيْكُمُ الْأَرْضُ بِمَا رَحُبَتْ. So here over there it was people relying on large number, it did not help. Over here, people said that our number is too small, it did not, and Quran is correcting them. Actually, some of their believers over there on the spot corrected this. They said, قال الذين يظنون أنهم ملاقو الله كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله والله مع الصابرين. طيب, after all the ranks were sorted out time and again, we have the very solid group here. And the very solid group, they said that they answered their the other side by saying that but those who knew that they were going to meet their Lord, and those with very strong faith, those who are out for a cause, those who believe that Allah will not let them down because they did everything they can and they're coming out for his cause. How often a small force has defeated a large army with God's permission? God is with those who are steadfast. That's a principle that was, the story was used to convey for us a very powerful and very fundamental message and principle, which is كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله والله مع الصابرين. I think there is a famous saying, never doubt that the small group of dedicated people can change the world, something like this. This is the verse, that's what the verse says. كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله. Of course, you take it in a bit more general way. Doesn't have to be in a battle. It's how many times, how often. A small group of dedicated people can affect major change, even when they were met with a lot of resistance. And we have stories, a lot of examples of movement that started very small, then because of the dedication and because of the solid group, it made big difference. Even in this country, so many cases of campaigns and movements that started in a very small, with a small group, but they ended up affecting major change. ولما برزوا لجالوت وجنوده قالوا ربنا يعني you're in this situation, you're relying completely on Allah. You came out for him. You're putting your lives on the line for no personal gains or worldly gain. قالوا ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. This is very high spiritual point that people reached. Just try to use your imagination. And always when you read the Quran is not an abstract thing. Try to use your imagination and envision what's going on. This is a small group of people, small troop. They found themselves facing a huge army, and their friends or their colleagues and comrades, they left them, group after group. That's a very tough situation. They knew that in this situation that they have only Allah, God to rely on. So when they met Goliath and his warriors, they said, our Lord, pour patience on us. That's a very beautiful, eloquent. Pour patience. ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا. Pour patience on us. Pour patience on us. Make us stand firm. وثبت أقدامنا. Just imagine like in the sand or in the ice and then you're asking Allah to make us stand firm and help us. Beautiful supplications and prayers. Pour patience on us, and then help us stand firm and make us stand firm and help us against the disbelievers. Beautiful supplications coming from very vibrant spiritualities and trust in Allah and tawakkul. ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. That's it. And you get the recipe for success. It's you do everything right. You do everything you can. You don't fall short, because Allah does not take care of anything that you are supposed to take care of. Allah takes care only of things that are beyond your limits. وأخرى لم تقدروا عليها قد أحاط الله بها. وأخرى لم تقدروا عليها. I mean, things that you could not, they're beyond your abilities and your limits. Allah will take care of them. And remember the story of Moses, being asked to hit the sea with his stick, what that stick will do. Yani. But that's the only thing he can do. Just do it. Yani. Or with Maryam, وهزي إليك بجذع النخلة. Allah could have get the dates to marry without her making an effort, but that's the only thing she can do. Do it. وهزي إليك, shake the palm tree to get هزي إليك بجذع النخلة تساقط عليك رطبا جنيا. Allah is there to help, but help those who help themselves, those who do their best and do everything. So the result, فهزموهم بإذن الله وقتل داود جالوت وآتاه الله الملك والحكمة وعلمه مما يشاء. We went back للطالوت. يعني الكريتيريا علم وحكمة في leadership. يعني even though he was يعني wasn't profile maybe of but Allah gave him and with God's permission they defeated them. David killed Goliath, and God gave him sovereignty and wisdom and taught him what he pleased. If God did not drive, this is the tadafa. This is now we have the time to cover it. This is tadafa, sunnah, major principle in Islam. It requires really, we need to spend adequate time on it. I may mention and come back to it. If God did not drive some back by means of others, yani if Allah does not keep some groups in check by the efforts of others, tadafa, that we call it today civic engagement. That's exactly tadafa, amr ma'ruf and nahy al-munkar, civic engagement. They say the same thing, because civic engagement probably is not the amr ma'ruf and nahy al-munkar itself, but it is a requirement. And we know the rule, ما لا يتم الواجب إلا به فهو واجب or صار واجب. If there is something that is required to fulfill your duty, that requirement becomes a duty. That requirement also becomes a duty. So if God did not drive some back by means of others, the earth would be completely corrupt. Imagine the good people get isolated, they are not civically engaged, and they don't advocate their good causes, earth will be full of corruption. The earth would be completely corrupt, but God is bountiful to all. So tadafa is very fundamental in Islam. It's not allowed for a Muslim to be passive. Yani you can't understand Islam properly and be isolated. Because if you are isolated, you cannot fulfill the mission, and Islam is a mission. Yeah. Islam is not about you staying home and praying. Yeah. Islam is essentially a mission. That mission requires that you open up to your environment, to interact with people, and you are civically engaged. Cannot happen without that. وَلَوْلَا دَفْعُ اللَّهِ النَّاسَ بَعْضُهُمْ بِبَعْضٍ. And this was mentioned also in Surah Al-Hajj. In Surah Al-Hajj, in the same context. أذن للذين يقاتلون أنهم ظلموا وأن الله على نصرهم لقدير الذين أخرجوا من ديارهم وأموالهم بغير حق إلا أن يقولوا ربنا الله ولولا دفع الله الناس بعضهم ببعض لهدمت صوامع وبيع وصلوات ومساجد. If good people, are not engaged to keep bad people in check, then there will be even the freedom of conscience and worship will be eliminated, will be suppressed. And it's talking to Muslim, but it starts with the freedom of conscience and worship for other faith. Let's read it. I mean, let's find it and read it, because I think these are the two places I know where tadafa, this rule of tadafa was mentioned. Tadafa means pushing and shoving, and people are in Surah Al-Hajj, verse 39 and 40. Verse 39 and 40, and I will tell you Surah Al-Hajj is Surah number 22. So Surah 22, verse 39 and 40. Let me read it, because this tadafa thing is very fundamental. Until very recently in this country, and probably until now in many communities. The profile of a good pious Muslim is the one who does not interact, one who's not engaged at all, talk only from their house, home, to work, to mosque, to etc. And that was the profile of the good pious Muslim, which is totally wrong. Because if that's your profile, then you are definitely failing to fulfill your mission. And if you're fulfilling your mission, Allah, more than likely, Allah is not pleased with you, because He assigned you a job and you're not doing it. طيب. Those who have been attacked are permitted to take up arms. You can see how Quran time and again put this fighting in context. So because they have been wronged, Allah has the power to help them. Those who have been driven unjustly from their homes, these are the ones who are given permission to fight Him, only for saying our Lord is God. That's all. If God did not repel some people by means of others, and if people or believers or faithful people, good people, people with principles and values, etc., they do not get engaged to keep the forces of evil or whatever in check. If God did not repel some people by means of other, many monasteries, churches, synagogues, and mosques, where God's names is much invoked, would have been destroyed. So Quran is telling Muslims that your job is to be engaged to guarantee the freedom for everybody. Of course, engagement in the normal situation, engagement is civic. In a very extreme, exceptional, etc., people are attacking you, that's another story. That's the exception we don't talk about. We talk about the norm. It's peaceful civic engagement. That's how you keep, Allah keeps group of people in check by another. And then the last verse before we start the other juz'a, we may go back to tadafa, but we, because we're going to start completely something else, starting with the beautiful verse of Ayatul Kursi, and then the fundamental principle of La Ikraha fi Deen. Inshallah, in the coming week, we're going to cover two very fundamental verses. One of them is Ayatul Kursi, and the other is the no compulsion in religion, which is a principle in Islam that we should never accept any claim that there is another verse or there is another hadith that superseded this principle, which is there is no compulsion in religion. Because it is confirmed in many places, and the Prophet was told that you don't even judge people, your job is just to deliver the message. You don't even convert people. Never mind to force it on them. It's not your job to convert, it's not your job to judge people. It's your job is to deliver the message in the best possible way, and it was exclusively إنما عليك البلاغ, إنما عليك البلاغ, talking to the Prophet ﷺ. أفأنت تكره الناس حتى يكونوا مؤمنين. يعني it's very obvious. It's just I don't know what happened to the Muslim minds that we allowed ourselves to be intimidated by some fringes who came up with very nonsense, ridiculous things, and suddenly we lost the principle of Islam, and we were taken in, or at least some people were taken in a completely wrong path. تلك آيات الله نتلوها عليك بالحق وإنك لمن المرسلين. تلك آيات الله نتلوها عليك بالحق وإنك لمن المرسلين. Those are the revelation of Allah which He recite to you, Muhammad, with the truth, and you truly are one of the messengers. So let's stop here so that we can use the rest of the time for any comments or questions, and then inshallah we'll get to the other part next week, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Nobody has question, You know what happened in Paris and when the student, he killed his teacher. If you can elaborate in this point, I think. You mentioned probably in the end, a few minutes ago,
I don't know, wallahi, I don't know where to start. I mean, this has many facets and it's complicated. Let's talk about these horrible incidents. These are victims of all these messages out there that confused many Muslims, confused many young Muslims, and made them think that by doing this they were defending the Prophet, which is exactly the other way around completely. It's the Prophet himself, when he was alive, he was cursed, and he didn't ask anybody to kill anybody because of that. And Quran was confirming this, and in several places Quran was confirming that لنا نعلم أنك يضيق صدرك بما يقولون فسبح بحمد ربك وكن من الساجدين. There are several places. I mean, our deen, our religion, our guidance and Quran is very clear. It's the mess that was created in the history of Muslims by the action and by the publications, both. That is causing all this disaster. It's very damaging to the deen, damaging to the Prophet, damaging to everything good. I mean, the incident itself, if he didn't do anything, nobody will hear about it. There is no point. It will reinforce the bad image of Islam, give ammunition to whoever want to attack Islam. Of course, that's not to justify the reaction of the French government. That's a very provocative from the beginning, and it continued to be. And then we get into this cycle of action and reaction, which take us nowhere. It's not helping anything. It's not helping any good cause. It's not helping Muslim. It is not helping anything. It ended up with also those emotional reactions by Muslim. I mean, with all my due respect, they're not going to do much. It's going to be temporary reaction. We know Muslims, they're very good in responding for a few days, and then their memory is not really very strong. So people will be very soon will forget about. I'm talking about this reaction of Muslim that many people start thinking that they're going really to bring France to its knees, because of where they're. It's not going to happen. If we're looking for solving problem from the roots, it's basically understanding our religion, practice it the right way, and taking the Prophet as a role model. And if we had many copies of the prophets on earth, things would have been much different. The Prophet, we are saying about him in our books, we are presenting him in a very bad way. In books of Torah, and even in some hadith, in a very bad way. And then we're representing him in our action in also not a very good way. We're not very good ambassadors of Islam, either in the West or even in Muslim world. And we failed miserably to provide this a successful story or a model that we can point to. And as Muslims, with very few exceptions, and they are even so. I mean, I believe we're doing it to ourselves. We're doing it to ourselves by presenting the Prophet in a way that is not very proper in the books of Hadith and Torah. Someone who married his wife while she was 9 years old. What's the point? And we have debates and people emphasizing that's true, even though that was proven that not true, and more than likely it's not true. And they're still saying it, and I don't know, 6 or 9 or whatever. And many other things. The Prophet is not in the books of heritage, and even some hadith, Prophet is not presented the same way he's presented in the Quran. There are some hadith that says that the Prophet did or condoned or ordered things that are not proper. So we have a lot of work to do in sorting out this heritage so that we can present the Prophet in the best possible way, in the right way. And we don't have to be defied. The Prophet is great personality and great life. We just present it as is, and focus on what the Prophet represents. And I always say, you want to be like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? It's very simple. 1, uswa. You develop yourself into a role model for people around you. Why? Because the Prophet was uswa. They want to be like the Prophet. You develop yourself into a role model. Role model not with the amama or whatever you're going to wear. No, a role model in your interaction with people, in your character, etc. The Prophet is essentially is what? The Prophet, you want to be like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, try to be like him in his worship, in his devotion, worship, and relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many of the people who do nonsense, I mean, I don't know how good even their practice of Islam. And it's good that you have that emotion, but it is being channeled in the wrong way. 1, there is an energy should be put in be trying to be like the Prophet in your worship, and then try to be like the Prophet in his character. That's the Prophet. Uswa, Rabbani, and then try to be like the Prophet who was sent mercy to humanity. Rahmatan lil Alameen. And you try to be mercy. You don't have to be mercy to the whole world. Be mercy to the people around you. Wherever you are, be mercy. As a community, be mercy to the city and the neighborhood in which you settle. As an individual, be mercy to the people around you. Mercy, rahma. Character, mercy, role model, devotion, spiritual devotion, and then dedication to the cause. You want to be like the Prophet? The Prophet, since the moment he was commissioned, he was assigned this mission, which is your mission and my mission. It's not Muhammad's mission. He was sent to show us how to do it. Inna anzalna alayka al-kitaba lin-nas. This is whatever the Prophet ﷺ was doing. He was a demo, showing us this is your mission. It is assigned to every one of you. So he was sent just to show you how you do. Try to be like the Prophet in his dedication to the cause 24/7. He would talk to anybody who would listen. He will not spare any effort to understand and to fulfill the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You want to be like the Prophet? Read about his leadership model. Read about the greatest leader who walked on earth, who built the most successful movement. Try to understand that model of his leadership and that model of building and leading a community that was very successful. Yeah. And it was not a miracle. It was through human effort. Yeah. We leave all of this and we just focus on a couple of appearances, and then we remember the Prophet only when somebody does something or cartoons, or then we remember that we have the Prophet. Yeah. Like, this is really very ridiculous. And I really I respect and appreciate the emotion that people really have emotions toward the Prophet. That's good. You like him, you don't you don't accept that he's presented in a bad way, or there is defamation or whatever. But just look inside to fix. I mean, let's take care of this mixed bag heritage, and let's be good ambassador for this Prophet, become like the emissary that he used to send to different places. And imagine yourself that the Prophet is alive and he sent you as his emissary to Fairfax or to this city or that state or whatever, or this county. What are you going to do, Ian? And I don't focus on the other side. I always focus on what we can do, because complaining, blaming, نستنكر ونندد ونشرب وندين, we lived all our life doing this and did not happen. Nothing happened. We condemn, we denounce, that's the Arab League, and this it led us nowhere.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Anushi. I have a question on verse number 247.
What about?
saying, وقال لهم نبيهم إن الله قد بعث لكم طالوت ملكا. If there was, since there was a prophet then at that time, which was Dawood, نبيهم, why is it that Allah sent Talut as the leader?
Who, first of all, it's not sure that Dawood was the prophet at that time. Maybe Dawood later became prophet. And then in Bani Israel, there used to be a separation between not church and state, but between the religious role and the political role. Yani, Bani Israel, they had prophets and kings. It's only Dawood and Sulaiman, I think, who combined the two. But throughout their history, they used to have prophets and kings. So it was very normal that they were talking to a prophet, asking that Allah will appoint a king, because fighting was the responsibility or the part of the king, not the prophet.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Suhail. My question is, what are some of the reasons that there has been a lot of negative understanding about the Prophet ﷺ since the beginning of Islam by the non-Muslims until now? Like it's getting even worse. Like, and why this so much hatred towards him? Like,
well, it's not hatred. We have to separate the two. At the time of the Prophet, it was simply what they call kill the messenger. Usually, people who resist any movement of change or any message of change, and they fail to find arguments against the message itself, they go to attack the messenger. They call it kill the messenger. So let's say he's a liar, let's say he's this and he's that, so that people will not listen to him. Because if we didn't have a strong argument, if they didn't have a strong argument against his message, so let's attack him. And that's happening until now. And it's going to happen till the day of judgment. It's going to always be like this. Whoever come up with a message And if people cannot argue against that message, the message is strong and appealing and very coherent, usually they try to go after him. So that's at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. These times, and I want us to understand that this is not because of hatred. That's culture. I mean, they do this to Jesus. They do this to in some societies, and in France probably the peak, because the secularism in France is an extreme. It's not like the Anglo-Saxon understanding of secularism, which is not anti-religion. Secularism in France is the extreme version of it, which is really laïque. It's so this is, and we figured it out when it happens to the Prophet ﷺ. But it happens to every prophet. Yeah. They do it with every messenger. They do it with everything. That's in their culture and in their law. It's not wrong. In their law, a public figure, something that is public, whether he is alive or has died, that's normal. I remember one time the president of Tunisia, long time ago, was attacked by the French newspaper Le Monde. Attacked in a very negative way. So he complained to President of France, I think Mitterrand at that time. He told them, "Can you tell these people of Le Monde to stop?" So the French president laughed and said, "They're doing it to me. What are you talking about? That's normal." So just to tell you that it's not direct, it's not like people should not take things out of context. Yes, there are bigots in this world, bigots against everything, and there are bigots against Islam and etc. But it's not all driven like by hatred or bigotry, etc. It's part of it that is culture, and the reaction of Muslims, it's the one that blew it out of proportion. The first cartoons, that newspaper, I think I wrote an article at that time, and I did some research to find how many people read it and how many people saw that cartoon. It was a very small number. But when it was attacked, the whole world saw it. The whole world was curious to know about this newspaper and to purchase it and to see these cartoons. So it's a bit basically backfired. It's something that you could have easily neglected. It will go nowhere. And that reaction, basically, you shoot yourself in the foot. And at the end of the day, it's not about people like you or love or hate you. This world is governed by this rule that we discussed today of pushing and shoving, tadafa. You have to make your case. There is no room in this world for people, for nations or communities who are weak or who are begging their rights and who are still waiting for the international community to help them. That's only Arab and Muslim countries are still doing this. Everybody realized that you have to build very strong economy, very robust, very good education system, and you have to inspire and mobilize your people around a very national dream or national project, and then become respected. Become respected because you manufacture almost everything that you need. You are in very strong trading position. You have a reasonably strong army, etc., etc., etc. All people in the world realize that this is the way. Only Muslims are still either condemn, denounce, etc., or having that emotional reaction that is very temporary, that will change nothing in the world, or worse, responding in a way that will backfire, that will make even the situation.
جزاك الله كل خير دكتور سعد. إن شاء الله see you next Sunday بإذن الله.
إن شاء الله. جزاكم الله خير إن شاء الله.
السلام عليكم.
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم
السلام.